CSZ D&I Talks features the use of adult language and discussion of serious topics that may be new for certain viewers. Please be advised.
All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Comedy Sports Chicago's D&I Talks with your host, me, Luis, a longtime comedy sports player here in Chicago and in Los Angeles, and also our Director of Diversity and Inclusion. Now, we started this show a while back to introduce everyone to our Ensemble members, but also to hear their backstories, to hear their climb through the world of improv, not just in Chicago, but maybe in their hometowns as well, but also specifically here at Comedy Sports Chicago. Now, today, boom, I did it. I reached the top. Like my reporting has finally gotten me all the way to the big guy. Today we have ensemble member and artistic director Jason Geis with us. Boom. What do you want your intro music to be here?
I don't know, just like something because that's such a good setup. I want it to be like really gay after that. Like I'm a little teapot.
All right, let me see what I can think of. I'll think of something. Okay. Today we have ensemble member and artistic director Jason Geis with us. Boom.
I'm gay, I'm really gay, I'm super duper gay.
How are you, friend?
I'm good. Congratulations on making it to the top of the mountain.
You know what? It's been months. Just
Yeah.
rifling through papers, and I had to get a desk lamp, and it was just like a lot of brow beating. But here I am.
You're the Woodward and Burns of comedy sports.
I was just gonna say, I was like, now I know how those two guys felt.
Very similar.
Yeah. So I'm just like, did I ever think that like my sociology degree would lead me to this point? No. But you know, life is crazy. Life is just life, you know.
Congrats.
But you can read all about it in my book.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, but I live at the end.
Phew.
Yeah, well, you know, I don't want to scare folks.
Yeah, don't scare anyone just yet.
All right, so I'm glad you're here. Glad we finally got a chance to chat. Especially since we are in the middle of Pride Month. You're wearing your Gunkel shirt. It's a good time for us to just kind of chit chat, because you kind of had this very interesting entrance into the comedy sports world. And
is that right?
I'm sorry.
Is that right?
Yeah, just a little bit. I don't know if you heard, but I don't know how many people actually like have heard what that was like. Sure. So, but first, what I always start with everybody is just a little bit about you, a little bit about your background and how you got into the world of improv.
Sure, yeah. So I went to school at the University of Kentucky, and I went for music and theater, that sort of thing. And, you know, I think anyone who goes to college for music and theater has a very similar experience. About halfway through, they're like, what am I doing? So as I was sort of like going through that process, I knew I liked being on stage, and I knew I liked, you know, entertaining people, and I was always better at the more comedic roles, and I liked singing. I was really good at saxophone and clarinet, so I was able to like cobble together enough things to get me some scholarship money, and that sort of thing. So I did a lot of like performing arts in college, and I knew I wanted to move to Chicago probably around my junior or senior year of college. My uncle, who has since passed away, used to live up here, and we would come up here a lot. And I just remember toward my junior and senior year, we would come up to Chicago a lot for various trips. And I remember going to like Second City and IO and all those things and being like, this is what I want to do. So when I graduated college, I'd come up here on like spring break and auditioned for conservatory and got in. And, my mom and dad thought it was like the coolest thing in the world. They're like, you got into Second City. I'm like, let me level set. I got into the ability to take a class at Second City or eliminate 5 levels of classes essentially. But they thought it was great. They thought it was a big deal. So I moved up here in 1999 and enrolled. When I first moved to Chicago, I didn't have an apartment because I had also gotten a job inadvertently in advertising. My roommate in college was in the advertising program, and they were doing this big advertising competition where like every college got the same brief, and they all had to come up with campaigns. It was for a new Toyota car, I think, at the time, and no one knew how to do design. So I learned how to do design to help him because he was a writer. And so he would bring me to the meetings with him, and the professor was like, you're fun. You're real fun. Like, you can present. You seem like... So they had me as part of the presentation team. So I was in Chicago for this presentation. And a bunch of ad agencies saw me and were like, hey, do you want to work in an ad agency after college? I was like, yes. I didn't go to school for it. I don't have a portfolio. Didn't matter. So I got hired at one of the larger ad agencies in the world, Fulcone Belding. So I had a job, and I knew I was starting conservatory, but I didn't have a place to live the first 2 months in Chicago. So I was just like right from my little town in Ohio to Kentucky to Chicago in a hostel. I just started doing classes sort of right away. Along the way, I was going to see a ton of shows, like every, I think, person who arrives in the city, like just goes everywhere and sees everything they can. And I was flyered when I moved into, eventually my roommate from college moved up here and we got a place in Wrigleyville. We were walking through Wrigleyville over by the old IO at Clark Street. And I got flyered for a comedy show that was only $5. And, for a 21-year-old who's not making any money, like $5, great. And it was BYOB. So we went and got like some cheap beer and went and watched it. And it was great. It was super funny. It was packed. It was sold out. I had never heard of this place. It was called Low Sodium Entertainment. And it used to be, everything's changed now. Like I have to like give you landmarks for where they used to be. Do you know where the old Pick Me Up Cafe was?
Yes.
Like where Clark and Sheffield sort of split there.
Yes.
There's a CrossFit gym there now, but it used to be a theater called Stage Left Theater.
Okay.
And Low Sodium Entertainment was there, and that's where we saw the show. And they did this thing at the end of the show where they would pass around a clipboard and be like, hey, if you're interested in classes or more about us, just sign the clipboard and we'll notify you, sort of thing. And, it came by me. I'm like, no. And then, passed it along. And I got an email and a phone call the next day from them. And I was very puzzled, and then came to figure out my roommate had signed me up. And he was like, hey, if we do classes, we have a new level 1 starting. And I was like, no, I don't have any money. Like, no, my mom and dad are paying for Second City, but everything else, no, I can't really afford right now. And he's like, here's the thing. Take the first class for free, and if you like it, we'll figure something out. I'm like, all right.
Okay.
So I came home, took the first class for free, loved it. And he basically was like, hey, if you want to help with like ticket sales or basically like interny type work, I'll let you work your way through the program. Okay. So I started taking classes with them. And within, I would say I got to their level 2. So I guess that was like maybe 10 weeks later. They hired me into the full company. They're like, no, you're just in now. So I started doing shows like as a 22-year-old, like right away. I came to find out that company was like the most despised improv company in all of Chicago. They were formerly, the guy who ran it was like, he was formerly in the scene and like at Annoyance and IO and Second City and had burned every single bridge. And he kind of saw himself as the rebel of Chicago improv. And basically when we got into the cast, if you were cast in their ensemble, you weren't allowed to take classes or perform anywhere else. So I stopped doing Second City. I stopped doing everything else. I didn't go see other shows. And he kind of like, it almost had this like cult-like mentality where it was like, fuck every other theater. They don't care about you. We do. And he paid the performers. So he would also say like, we're the only ones who pay, like no one else respects you. So for a long time, for a couple of years, that's what I did, and I stopped doing all the other stuff, and was just like hardcore into this place because the shows were packed. They were sold out all the time. The shows were super dumb and fun. They were short form. We had a couple of long form shows, but mostly short form. Yeah, and it was just great until he became unhinged, and we lost the Stage Left space because he got into a fight with the owners of Stage Left. So we moved to what is the Bocce Pizzeria right at the Red Line Addison stop. Right as soon as you come off that pizza place, it's like up. It's like in the walk up. We performed there. It used to be a coffee shop, and then the guy who ran the coffee shop bolted and left town. And so the guy who ran the comedy theater was like, "I'll take the lease." So he took over the lease, and we took that whole space, but he kept it a coffee shop, and we had to.
You had to work?
We had to work. So that's about the time when I started thinking like, this is bullshit. Like I've been snowed. I got an ulcer because I had slowly as I was in that company, he was doing less and less, and he was giving more and more things to me to do. He's like, you're really good at this. They like you. People listen to you. So I was starting to run rehearsals. I was teaching classes with a number of other people. But it was a few of us that were doing a lot of work, and we all sort of were like, this is not great. Like, we feel this guy's a pig. Like, he was classic old school white guy, male in improv, like, hey, I run a theater. You want to sleep with me kind of deal. And it was getting like really gross, and a lot of us just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So essentially, we kind of made this like dumb pact that we never thought would actually happen, where, one of us was like, hey, if one of us gets fired, we'll all quit. And it was like, okay, cool. Like one of those like late night, like, if you get fired, I'll quit you. And then it happened. One of our friends got fired, and he's like, I got fired. I was like, you know what? A deal's a deal.
Let's do it.
So I called and quit, and then I told some folks that I had quit, and within like a half an hour, like I'm not exaggerating, the entire company quit, and there was like 25 performers, and it just like wildfire spread. Like this person told this person, and like, well, if you're not doing it, I'm not doing it, and it became this like really, everyone quit, and then everyone looked to the few of us and like, well, what are we doing then? So me and my roommate, who a lot of people in the improv community know, Micah Philbrook. He teaches at Second City. He was on the boats and stuff. He's a great guy. We were living together, and we had a rooftop deck. So we had everyone over, and just kind of on the spot, we were like, I guess we'll start something. So that's when we started PH Comedy Theater. So it started on a rooftop deck in 2001 up on our deck. And then we just sort of like went into high gear creating a comedy theater out of nothing. And at that time, we'd also realized we should probably get back into training. So a lot of us started going to classes. Micah and I in particular enrolled in level 1 at IO, and we were pretty like well known around the community as being the assholes of comedy. So when they saw us in class, they were very skeptical. It was Jeff Griggs was our level 1 teacher, and he was like, what are you guys doing here? We're like, we're taking improv class. And they're like, I don't think so. It was this whole thing they had to explain, like, no, we're really doing it. Like, we're really, here's our check. Like, we're really paying. And so then it slowly over time, they grew to like us quite a bit, but it was really weird. It was like jumping back into like, so then that's when I sort of hit my foot to the pedal more. Like I'd been doing this other thing for a long time, not a long time, like 2 or 3 years. And I was doing a ton of shows and I was performing, but I wasn't really like getting the Chicago improv experience as everyone has come to know it. I had this very different way in, but I'd gotten a lot of stage time. So I sort of was at an advantage over some people who are starting right away with level 1 or level A at somewhere else. So I re-enrolled back in Second City, and I enrolled in IO, and I did them at the same time. And then just started doing all the typical like auditioning for Playground, getting on a Playground team, getting placed on an IO team, independent team, sketch shows, all that sort of thing. So it just sort of like really burst open when that happened. So that's sort of like it's a weird way in.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's similar to just a lot of people's experiences in that, you hit a certain point where you're just kind of like, this is not great. This is not what I thought it was, or where you kind of you pivot, because and you find that theater where you're like, this is the best Kool-Aid, and this is the Kool-Aid I wanna keep drinking for a while until either you quit or something better comes along, or a myriad of reasons. But so then you ran PH for a few years.
Yeah, so PH, that's the other thing. It's a unique experience when you're running a theater while also taking classes elsewhere. Because the thing that I think helped me, honestly, is I was never in a desperation mode to get on a team or to get placed on anything, because I had something. I had a thing that I was running that was pretty consuming. This all was great and I was loving it, but I wasn't like, so like, if I don't get on an IO team, my life is over. That a lot of us get to that point. So yeah, I ran PH from 2001 to 2017. So 16 years.
16 years.
Yeah.
While still just kind of like taking classes and doing all this other stuff and
and I was on I think I was on a total, by all when else was said and done, like 17 or 18 IO teams, 2 or 3 playground teams, a bunch of independent teams, a bunch of sketch shows. I was in Gayco. I directed a bunch of stuff for companies. Like I directed something for Mission Improbable. Like I was doing a ton of stuff still, but PH was always my focus. Yeah.
So what eventually brought you over to comedy sports?
Cynthia Kamak. When PH closed in 2017, I decided I wasn't going to do improv anymore. I took a break. And I was like, you know what? I've been doing this since I was 21 years old, like nonstop. With no break, and I was now at that time, oh god, I can't do the math, I'm too old, like 38, 39, and I just was like, you know what, I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't find any joy in it, because PH ended sort of badly, and it was like, it left a real bad taste in my mouth. I had just come off being in a fairly precarious medical condition for the last year and a half, where I had to relearn how to walk and all this other stuff. So I was in a new sort of headspace. I was like, you know what? I'm just not going to do this. And I was actually about to move to LA. I had been interviewing at ad agencies in LA. I had been looking at apartments. I had gotten a job offer in LA. And so I was in the process of like figuring out a move to LA. And Cynthia had called me up and she was like, hey, I know you've never been able to do comedy sports, because PH and comedy sports always rehearsed at the same time. So I was never able to do both. And she's like, hey, they're having auditions. And I was like, And she's like, well, I put your name in if you're interested in doing it. And I'm like, I don't know. And Kamak, like she's very persuasive and very like, I think you need to do it. I put my word in there. So I came and auditioned, and it was funny because I had auditioned for comedy sports 2 years before that. I auditioned when like Sean Price and all those guys got in, and I got a call back, and Pat and I had a long conversation around like, because I knew Cynthia, there were a couple of people we shared. PH shared a couple of people with comedy sports at the time, and Pat had worked out like a flexible rehearsal model where like Cynthia would do 2 weeks at comedy sports, 2 weeks at PH. So I had thrown that out. I'm like, hey, I'd be willing to do this. And he was like, I just can't. And I think I found out later the powers that be were not a fan of that. So I just sort of had written it off. And then I did my audition. I had not done any improv in a year. It was very weird. And I walked out just kind of being like, well,
that happened.
That happened. And then, I knew Natalie Younger, who had been in PH, and I know she had auditioned, and she called and said, hey, I got a call back. Did you get a call back? And I'm like, no, I didn't get a call back. It's because I knew the callbacks had started going out. I was like, no, I didn't get a call back. And then toward the end of that day, I got a call from Pat Connolly, who was like, hey, we got to keep this kind of under wraps, but we're not going to give you a call back. And I was like, okay, yeah, no, I didn't think so. Like, I didn't do anything great up there. He's like, we're just going to hire you. What's that? So yeah, he just made me an offer like right away, and I didn't have to do the callback, which was awesome. And so yeah, I jumped in. That was like November of 2018. I jumped in and I joined with Ali Stark and Carly and Adam and Marilet and Kevin DeLiva. So it was a killer class that came. Josh,
Yeah.
it was a killer class that came in. But I had never done comedy sports. I think I'd seen like 2 matches ever in my life. So it was very weird. Like, what is this?
And I know it wasn't too long after that that the job opening for artistic director came in, and it was this very like multifaceted interview that you kind of had to go through to eventually end up getting the job. But I guess my bigger question is around the idea of like what's it like to essentially take over at a place that you're still essentially
New.
but learning how to do the things.
Yeah, no, I think that's been the like weirdest part of this whole journey is because any other time I was a director or a coach or anything else, I sort of came in with a very like, oh, I know this group, or I know what they're going for, or I know the show I'm directing, or I know the place I'm running. Whereas this was it was very intimidating because I knew a lot of the players had been here many years, some as long as like 10, 20 years had been playing. And I knew I was not the obvious choice for this job. And I knew I was probably not necessarily the most popular choice for the job. I was an unknown quantity to a lot of people. A lot of people didn't quite know me, or they knew me in passing, or that sort of thing, or as the guy who ran PH. But being dropped into something and have to run it while you're learning it is a fairly humbling experience, I'll be honest. Especially something as like storied as comedy sports. And it's not like Second City where they can just pick a new director for a new review. Like that new review, you work on it, right? It's not an established thing. You help create it with the writers and you put it up. This was like, oh no, this is a tried and true 30-year proven thing. Here you go. What are you going to do with it? And I think there was a lot of people just sort of like, what are you doing? Like what makes you qualified to even do this? Or so it was very like, and I still honestly like 2 years into it, I still very much feel like I'm walking on eggshells all the time of like, I just don't want to mess this up because it's such a like well-known. I mean, you've been doing it for 20 years and it's in 30 cities and it's this whole thing that I had no idea existed. It's a very intimidating process, even for someone like me who's been doing this for a very long time. Like I've been doing improv for, you've seen it since 1999, like a long time. I know what I'm doing. I'm confident what I'm doing. I've been a director for a long time, but this is a whole other thing.
It does kind of have its own like life onto itself of just like what the show is. And, as we've both learned, each city is very adamant about, well, it should be this, it's more like this, and everyone has their opinion on it. And I think having done it as long as I've done it, my biggest takeaway is just kind of like, as long as the audience is being entertained, like it doesn't really matter. But I didn't really have a horse in the race.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because whenever you direct something, every director has a different approach, and you've worked with a ton of directors, and you do legit theater too, so you've experienced this on every front. Is that every director sort of approaches how they work with the cast or an ensemble in a different way, and I've sort of really grown and evolved as a director over time too. Like I used to be more of an asshole. I know more, but that wasn't working. But when I came into this and like toward the tail end of PH and some of the other things I was directing, I was finding more success in just like meeting people where they were and not directing like as a whole. Like this is how I'm going to direct to all of you. Like everyone sort of needs a different way of being communicated to. So this ensemble in particular, like there were so many opinions. There were so many different, the thing that sparked me to apply for the job was I think I was in the cast 3, 4, 5 weeks maybe, and there was a big town hall, and everyone was upset, and there was a lot of opinions and a lot of feelings, and people stomping out, and like it was crazy. And I just sort of was like, there's no ensemble here. Like there's not a cohesive, like not everyone feels like they're part of the same thing. It feels like there are like 8 or 9 different fit pockets, right? And like even when I would come to practices or rehearsals, there weren't a lot of people there. It was like all the new people and maybe like a few diehards. But it was very like this very odd thing. So like in coming into this as a director, I was very much like, I just need to meet everyone and figure out what makes them tick and how I need to sort of approach each of the people differently. So I made everyone do a one-on-one with me when I started, so that I could get a sense of like, okay, this is what I've got. This is how I have to approach it. But it was a really fun experience for me because I haven't truly done something that I would consider like, original is not the thing to describe comedy sports, but I would say challenging as a director in a long time. Like we're doing spelling bee, cool. I know how the beats of the show go. I'll direct it. Oh, you want me to coach your improv team, and your thing is that you put on different coats. Great, I can do that. But this was very much like this is a show that's already established, but this is like we need to make an ensemble before we even worry about the show. And I haven't had to really do that since we started PH in 2001. So that's what was the most intriguing and difficult part for me.
For a long time, having observed so many ensembles, and I think you and I may have maybe had this conversation, but I've always believed that like there's 2 types of teams when it comes to comedy sports cities. Those that like play as an ensemble, and then those that just have talented individuals that just kind of do their thing. And for a long time in my mind, because I played for LA, watching Chicago was like, oh, Chicago's very much a team of individuals that they're very talented, but they play together.
Yeah.
But now it is very much like it's an ensemble, like, and it feels different.
Yeah, and honestly, like, candidly, I think the pandemic had a lot to do with that. Like we were on a good path before the pandemic, and I think, I didn't want to come in and kick a door down and be like, everyone has to be here all the time and this and that, and like be a rules kind of guy. I didn't feel like that was going to win anyone over. And not that I needed to really win anyone over, but you can't really build an ensemble if there's no trust. And so I had to establish that they could trust me and that everyone could trust me and that I was very transparent and I meant what I said. And there was no hidden like agendas or shadowy figures in the back making decisions. It was like, nope, this is it. And so I think that helped. I think people like realized like, okay, whether they liked me or not, or whether they liked where I was going or not, they at least got that sense. And then more people started coming because I wasn't wasting anyone's time. And I think people were starting to get something out of it. And then when the pandemic hit, we just sort of had to rally. Like I just was sort of like, I'm not going to let this die. We have to do something, came up with the idea of doing it in Zoom. And then I'm really lucky. And I think, I was having a conversation with Kate Cohen about this. And Kate was like, I think we wouldn't have been able to pull off the virtual stuff 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I don't think we would have been an ensemble enough that would have like bandied together and said, yeah, let's do this. Which was a great, like that, like melted my cold, icy Grinch heart when she said that. She's like, you got us to a place where we felt like, let's link arms and like go down with the ship if the ship is going down. And so when we decided to do the digital thing, so many ensemble members were like, I'm in. And I think that's when I had the like moment of, oh shit, we did it. Like we're like, they're an ensemble. They're working together. And it was really super satisfying. And like over the process of like learning how to do it and overcoming all the nonsense that is a digital show, I think what it ended up doing is it was the great equalizer, right? It put all of us in a room where like, nobody's done this before. Even if you've been doing comedy sports 20 years, nobody's done new choice over screens. So it made everyone sort of like take a step back and reevaluate and reappreciate what the show is, comedy sports, and like how the show works, and that it isn't necessarily the beats, it's the experience, and like how do you take that experience and translate it. And it really allowed us to finally, I think, push and innovate a show where in the past, people had been doing it for a long time. We're like, that's not how it's done, or there's a reason we do it this way. And this allowed all of that to get thrown out the window, and it allowed me as a director to be like, now is my chance, where I could change things and I could move things around, and I could actually like, what if we didn't do that? And no one was like, but that's how we always do it in our online shows. So I think that, the pandemic, while obviously horrible and never would I ever want to suffer through anything like that remotely ever again, it did have a fair amount of upside for this ensemble in that it gelled us even more together. It allowed us to innovate in a completely new way. And it's really, I think, coming out of it has set us up for success. And this ensemble, like, if you'd have told me when I took this thing over that this is how my one-on, because I just did another set of one-on-ones, that this is how my one-on-ones would have gone, I would have told you you're nuts. I didn't think I'd still be here in 2 years, if I'm being honest with you. So yeah, I'm really lucky that like people were willing to give me the benefit of the doubt. And I think it comes from like, it just comes from like, you at some point as you grow up and as you get older, and like I still consider myself growing up, you hit this point where you decide if you're going to be, like for me, I decided I was going to be a more empathetic person. Like I'd always been really closed off and shut off and like keep everyone away and like very sarcastic and that sort of thing. And like when I went through my medical condition and realized I was laying in a hospital room alone for like 18 months, it was like, boo. So I basically decided like I need to be more empathetic and I need to meet people where they are more. And so it allowed me to sort of walk into, I think, an ensemble that had a lot of baggage. And I think anybody in this ensemble would say that to you and say like, this was, it's always been a lot of fun for a lot of people, but I don't think it's ever been, for a lot of people, I don't know how serious they've taken it, or it's been like, yeah, but it's just this thing I do over here, or, I don't like this person, or there's just a lot of like that weird energy that feels like, it's always going to be there, but it feels like that has moved on and everyone's willing to like do something new, which I think is, it's exciting as a director. It's exciting to be 44 years old and like still getting excited by improv.
Right?
Yeah.
Of all the stuff, it's kind of why I'm still around. Like of all the stuff that I've done, this is the one that's always just been like, I still get nervous for shows. I still worry, like, oh, this has to go well. Like I still get there despite having been doing this for decades. And I'm one to bounce around a lot. So I was like, there's got to be something to it.
Yeah, imagine that feeling of like I feel nervous, and then put the weight of like I constantly, every time I perform or ref or coach or do anything for this building, for whatever reason, and it's not because anyone in this ensemble has said this or done this, but I constantly am like, they're waiting for me to fail. They're waiting for me to fail. They're waiting to be I told you so. They're waiting to say I told you so. And I think that just comes from me and how I've been and how I've been my whole life of like, even circling back to like the Pride Month aspect of this, like I didn't come out until I was 30 because I was like, no one's going to love you. No one's going to want you. I always have this like constant, like, no. So like, that's the point I have in every comedy sports match. It's just like, oh boy, gotta be the best person in this show, or they're gonna be like, why is he our director? So I get it. It's like, but that's kind of like the butterflies in your tummy too. It's like, it's kind of I'd rather feel that than be like, what time is it? Guess I'll slide into my jersey and fart out a game. It's like, I'd rather that feeling of like being on my toes and like, I gotta show up. I gotta like dig into this thing, or everyone's gonna,
and I think we had a nice like reawakening for a lot of people throughout the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because it was this new format, this new medium for everyone So it really like it leveled out everyone in regards to like,
Yeah.
you know, I've been doing this 20 years, and so like I have my way that I play this, but once we all went online, it was just like, oh, none of that works on here. Like it is brand new territory for everyone.
None of the shtick that you tried that worked on stage, or like, because so many of us, myself included, you're one of these players too. The audience fuels who you are as a performer. Like you're as a performer, like you feed off like that like eye contact with the one kid in the front row, or the like, Hars like just feeds off of when the crowd just like goes nuts for a dumb pratfall thing he did, and like take all that away from all of us, and we are powerless, and it's really interesting. It's like,
Oh,
wait, oh no, where are my crutches? Tiny Tim can't walk. It was very enlightening, but you're right. I do think that's what bonded everyone together.
it is. I think it's those aspects of the show that make it a more specific like comedy sports show, and
Yeah.
that we have the ability to like, all right, so like the we can connect with the audience more and make them feel like they are also creating the show and bring them along, and
Yeah.
even if the show might not be like the funniest thing we've done, we still have the ability to like, but you're here and you're with us and you're part of it. And when that's not there, you know what? It wasn't even that it wasn't there. It was that now, how do we connect with it?
Right. Right.
That's
It's
where
not as tangible as it used to be.
we started coming up with things like sixes and sevens, and finding a way to like connect with them despite the fact that I can't see you.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I think that was a hard part for me as a director of like, how do I keep the cast engaged when this is a very like, improvisers in general are very like feed my id, kind of like, that's why we all do it, right? It's for that quick hit of laughter, that like, oh, you're acknowledging I'm funny, and it's a rush, it's a high, it's why I do it. For the most part, that's why a lot of us do it. And you take all that away, plus everyone is like super depressed and sad. And how do you keep someone engaged through that and like keep them doing it with like, I don't know, is this even working? Um, it was super challenging, but it's interesting, like the way you say, like that you could feel the connection, right, with the audience. That's what the stage shows were for. I think something transpired in the online shows that for me was even more transforming. I think you and I have talked about this, in that yes, it wasn't the same as like the look on the kid's face, or the look on the couple, and they're like when they're clapping and like people standing up and cheering, and yeah, that was all gone. But there was like an intimacy now. Like we knew audience members by name now, and like we recognized them, and they were like coming into the room, and so there was this like different kind of intimacy and connection that happened in the online shows that we never had. That's what started to, I think, affect people, and people like really were like, well, we got to show up for Melissa or Mark or Amanda, who are there every week, and this is what they're using to get through this thing, and so we got to be there for them. And that I think was a very fulfilling thing for a lot of people, whether they were able to verbalize it that way or not. You sort of realized you were kind of helping people through this whole thing, while also helping yourself a little bit and figuring out yourself a little bit.
I think the chat allows people to just kind of like, essentially like, say facts and thoughts and things that we normally wouldn't hear in the live shows. And so, and of course you still have the anonymity of the internet, and so
Sure.
people are willing to like, I'm gonna open up a little bit more because that's what you do online. And so that, yeah, to see like the positive side of that sort of thing, and watch people really connect and come back and become these online super fans. And it's
Weird.
it's weird because, and I got to experience it twice because Elisa was creating her channel at the same time, so occasionally I'll pop in there and they'll use like the comedy sports emojis over at her channel.
Hmm.
Because, they have my face on them and everything, and it's just like, what is this? And as someone who's not very like, I'm not an online person like that.
Right.
It's just very like, I don't, I don't. What do you do? What are you all doing in my house?
Yeah.
It's been really interesting. But let me ask you. You mentioned you didn't really come out until you were about 30.
Yeah.
And which I had a similar experience where I didn't really start embracing that my queerness until I was like 37 or something like that.
Yeah.
35, something like that. But so now, as we try to do more of these Pride events and connect more with the Pride community, how do you how are you connecting those two sort of experiences for yourself, where like we're kind of having this kind of late in life connection, along with this later in life embracing of your sexuality?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. I think like comedy sports is finally coming out too, right? Like you look at how queer our ensemble is, and it's like it's kind of amazing. And so like for me, a lot of the reasons I wasn't coming out, I was overweight. I was like 400 plus pounds, and I just like had convinced myself that sexuality didn't really matter because I wasn't gonna find anyone anyway. So I just really kept repressing it. And when I finally did come out, it was a big no shit to like everybody. Everyone's like, oh. So like my mom was finally like, yeah, thank God. So it was not this like, oh, I was scared of my family or how my friends were going to receive it or anything like that. I just didn't feel like there was a place for it, if I'm being honest. Like I just didn't feel like in the community I was in, there wasn't a lot. I didn't want to be this is gonna sound funny. Like I didn't want to be the fat gay comic, or I didn't want to be like I didn't want that to affect how I was playing, because I was seeing that happening in the community. Like it was almost like commedia dell'arte. There was like, oh, it's the white kids, and then the one person of color and the gay, and the gay would get all the stereotype roles of the gay, and I didn't want to do that. And when I did come out, that did start to happen. Like I different teams I was on, or I'd get cast for things, and they're like, "Oh, you're going to be the gay guy," and I'm like, "Well, what does that mean?" So there was a little bit of that, and the way I sort of, overcame that was just playing through like that just happens to be who I am. I'm not necessarily gonna do that, but I have the choice to initiate that way if I want to. And so when I started, and this bled into how I directed PH too, but more specifically in comedy sports, where it's like we have to make it okay for these things to exist, but not the punchline, or not the reason for the joke, or the reason for the character, or the reason for that. And so getting these things more normalized within the space was really important to me. Not just Pride, but everything from Black History Month to all the initiatives that you've been working on. To me, that was really important. It was part of my pitch as an artistic director, is that we have to start normalizing these things and just showing them. Like, have a gay couple in a scene that isn't in June. Like, oh no, what if we have two lesbians in a scene together in, February? What would that look like? So trying to normalize these sort of things was really important to me in comedy sports, because there was this very aha moment of like, hey, we're like 2 blocks from one of the gayest neighborhoods in the world, and none of that community has any idea that they're welcome at this place, which is nuts, because the whole thing is comedy for everyone. So being able to sort of like, not necessarily like put a rainbow on everything and call it a day, but start to normalize and have these casts that are maybe like, the funny thing is, like when we were setting up the Pride matches, I'm like, these are teams that already have played together before. Like we've already had an all queer match without even purposefully doing it. And that's the goal for me, is like, as these events become, and we highlight these different communities within our ensemble more and more, it shouldn't necessarily be like I have to scramble or like put them together. It's like, oh yeah, you've seen this before. We're just really celebrating them during this time and like giving them the spotlight that they deserve. And that was the big thing for comedy sports that I think, is still going through some evolution and some growing pains of like, where does especially I think from a POC standpoint and a queer standpoint of like, where does that fit in this very like cookie cutter, white bread, family sort of oriented show? Like, and how does that react? I know, early on, one of the conversations we had to have is like, when I wanted to start doing Pride stuff, was the question like, is that family friendly? And I really had to like, and that's and you'd be quick to jump on like, how dare anyone ask that? That's such an asshole question. And it's like, it's really not when you think about it. Like, there's so many people who just aren't aware of the lifestyles, and they only know the stereotypes because that's all we've ever really shown them. Like, if you think about like even Will and Grace, like Jack was a stereotype and Will never kissed anybody. So the thing
is that true?
I think like not until the like very final season did he even kiss his boyfriend. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? That was the lens at which we saw gay people, right? That we were the big best friend or the kooky like feather boa character. And so for someone to ask, is that family friendly? And everyone was innuendo, right? Every gay character was double entendre and innuendo and clever. And, while that is true, I think that's the question that came up right away of like, is this appropriate for our audience? And it's like, have you been to Andersonville? It's just all gays with strollers. And it's, I think that was part of it too, is a little bit of an education of, this system in general. Like, this is normal. This is like, don't treat it as special or weird, and it won't feel special or weird. Just treat it as normal and people will start to accept it. And that was the big thing that I had to bring from like, I came out too late to have a bigger impact on things like my IO teams and things that were earlier. But I was, when I took this over, I was fully proud of who I was, very out, very, and not that I wanted to like, just like paint the whole ensemble rainbow and make everything queer, but it was more about like bringing that inclusivity and that sense of family into it so that everyone felt welcome, no matter what community, going back to that, like when I was sitting there and there were like 8 different communities within the theater, how do we make them all, they can still exist. Like, there still are all the gay players, right? And there still are all the POC players. There still all are but they all feel like they can hang with each other and they all feel welcome in the same place, and they can share each other's experience and that intersectionality. And that I think is key to what, your original question of like creating the ensemble. That's how you create an ensemble.
And, yeah. And I think by, you had this, when you came in, you wanted to, like you said, connect everybody. Yeah. And, for better or worse, through everyone's kicking and screaming, it happened. And I think it might have been kicked into overdrive when the pandemic hit, because all of a sudden, of course, everyone's looking to you to save us. But I think it also, like, immediately made everyone kind of hit that wall of, like, am I going to trust him or am I not going to trust him? Yeah. And so that was, like, I think that was a turning point for a lot of people. Like, okay, like, I'm in. Let's do it. And the comfortability of that, I think, has allowed people to kind of embrace however deep their connection to the LGBT community is.
Yeah. And
I think through that, we discover the intersectionalities where people are actually more comfortable to be like, actually, I'm a little like that too. It's like, oh, great, come here. Totally. And so it's been really cool to see people kind of just have that exhale moment and come into the room and have everyone just like, yeah, come on in.
And that includes our audiences too. Like our audiences in the virtual world, have also felt that and have also felt included and welcomed. And we've had, the ones who've identified, we've had quite a few, LGBT audience members who are like, this, I feel I belong here, and I feel like this is a place for the weirdos and that I'm welcomed. And I think that's great that has like haloed out. You're right though, like the amount of people who during this my time, in this role, who have sort of like not come out, but just been like more, I guess, socialized of who they are, and more free and feel more confident to share who they are. It's sort of like I've been a little like taken. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm so glad all these people feel this way. It's really lovely to be like, great, this is awesome. Please come in. Water's fine.
It's been it's been really cool watching everyone just kind of like figure out how they're, I don't want to say how they're going to present themselves, but there was something about the fact that it's us on screen, and though there is an audience there, so we're in, we're in performance mode. Yeah. There's also something about not being able to see them that makes us act the way we act around each other.
Totally.
And people being able to see that, one of the things I was talking to, I think, Elisa about recently was just kind of like, because we move these shows online, a lot of people's like parents are able to see regular shows all of a sudden, and they're seeing the community, and some of them have shared like, this is the first time my parents are seeing blankety blank blank blank. Right. And it's just like, it's kind of cool that our reach has kind of stepped outside of Chicago for a while to let people see that, like, like this is what the Chicago team is like. And it's, I don't know, it's been really cool to be able to share that, though that was not our goal. We just wanted to do shows.
Right. No, and that's, and that's the goal. That is the point of like, there's nothing special about it. I mean, there obviously is something special about it, but it's not stunt casting. It's just this is who we are as an ensemble, and this is how we present as an ensemble. And I think, you're right. And as we've been able to play with other cities and sort of like just being able to show up in that way too. And I think, I've talked to a lot of the other city owners who are like, you guys just have such a joy about you when you play. And it just feels like such an integrated and such a, like, everyone just feels like there's no, like, everyone likes each other in some capacity, and it really shows in your shows. And it's, it's always nice to hear that from other people who are essentially doing the same thing we're doing, but having like, and hearing their questions and hearing like, well, how did you do that? And how did you do this? And how do we get to having a more open ensemble like that? So it's good that I feel like we can somewhat affect change in that way too. Of like, there have been owners who have reached out. They're like, hey, can we pick your brain? Which I think is great. That's what you want, right? You want to be able to share what you've done and your experiences with others, and let them take it and see what they can do with it.
How do you feel that, or how do you think that we can essentially parlay that into recruitment to reach more other groups, other neighborhoods, and show them that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, like you and I share a very similar philosophy in that I am always hesitant to like what I call stunt cast and just take on a bunch of like, look, we did it. We hired all women, or, we hired an entire all POC, which of course that would be amazing. But I also think we need to set anyone up, no matter what group you represent, up for success. And when you're putting them on a main stage ensemble in front of people and being like, this is our best and our brightest, you have to make them feel that. And so I think leading by example has to continue to sort of be our modus operandi, right? Like we have to show up, we have to be consistent, and we have to live what we say. And I think those three things are really crucial, because otherwise you smell bullshit a mile away. Like, why are they asking me? Like, are they just trying to pad their numbers, or are they just trying to do this as a PR thing so that, they don't get called out in the next Facebook post? And I think that's where, like, we definitely have so much work to do, but we haven't necessarily been caught up in a lot of that's been going on over the last, let's call it year and a half, because we're trying, at least we're trying to do the work, and that's what I think is going to help with recruitment. I think the more people see that we're making efforts and we're trying, and we've been very like transparent. I mean, this whole series that you do is, I think, huge. It's very transparent, right? Like, everyone's been really honest with you. They've been really raw, and they're doing it because they don't fear losing their jobs. They don't fear that if by being honest about something they didn't like within comedy sports, or if they don't like the way something's going and sharing with you, that there's not going to be any retribution. And I think that goes a long way to people feeling comfortable being part of this ensemble, even from within it. But if you're like someone who wants to join this ensemble, it's like, well, great, they're giving me the performance opportunity. Great, they have an established product where people are going to come see me. So at the end of the day, I'm getting what I want out of it. But man, they're also doing all these D&I efforts. They, there's this. Like, I'm not hearing all the chatter about it. So I think that we just have to keep our heads down a little bit and keep working, versus like, well, we did our one POC audition, or we did our Pride audition, or we did our Pride shows for the year. No more gay. Like, I think we just have to keep. It needs to be
back
clean
into the closet.
Yep, back
until next June.
Yep, I look at it as
was
cumulative, right? Like, we have to keep having these things have to be more present and have to be more normalized, like I said at the beginning, and that is what I think makes people want to join, because they feel like they can be themselves, and they feel like they're going to get, it's a two-way street. They'll get what they want from a performance aspect, but they also won't feel otherized or judged, or that they're being cast as a token or anything like that. They'll feel like they're actually welcome and part of the community.
Well, tell you what, Jason, believe it or not, it's almost been an hour here, so I know. But this was awesome, and I think a good first conversation, since now that things are opening back up out in the world. I think we are in for a lot of big change and a lot of big moves for us. So I'm gonna sit back down and chat once a lot of that stuff gets rolling along. But for now, this is amazing, and thank you so much for being here. Any final thoughts or anything you'd like to throw out as we wrap this up?
No, I just want to thank you for doing these. I love watching these. It's like one of my favorite things to do every week is when I catch up on Sunday, I go back and watch these. I watch them almost like a podcast. They're great. And I just want to thank everyone who's been involved in, whether you're a fan, whether you're a player, whether you're someone, from another city, anyone who's been watching these or participating. It's just been great to be part of this community. So thank you to all of you.
All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for checking this out. Once again, hopefully you're enjoying your Pride Month, and please continue enjoying your Pride Month, as we have more Pride Month programming coming through the rest of the month, all culminating in our Pride Weekend, which will be July 24th through the 27th. You can check all this out at the website, czchicago.com. Please find us on Twitch. We are the CSZ Network. We can also find us on Facebook and in Twitter and Instagram. And then, of course, please check out the where was I going with this? This is the first time I've ever actually slowed down on one of these. Please check out the D&I Talks YouTube page, which you can find if you're currently watching this on the stream. Just go ahead and type !DI Talks, and that will come right up. There's the link for you. All right, everyone, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your Pride Month, and we'll see you at the next Comedy Sports Chicago's D&I Talks.
Goodbye.
I can't believe I messed that up. First time.
Very good.